Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 SimPilot, and today we're taking a look at another part of the Fenix Simulations A320 for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and that today is the standby instruments. So we're looking at a few things today. We're going to be looking at the Standby Artificial Horizon, the ISIS, Integrated Standby Instrument System, and the DDRMI. So these are options in this aircraft. They are available in the EFB, and I've heard a few people ask, well, what do they mean and what's the difference between them? So today we're going to look at them and discuss when they may or may not be used and what sort of features they have. So yeah, it's something we had talked a little bit about before, but not in quite as much detail as I'm planning to go into today, where we're going to look at all of them and the different phases where they are used. We're parked on the ground here in Luton, bit of a gloomy day. I'm just going to start cold and dark just to give you an idea of why these systems are so important, and they are, to be clear, crucially important to operating the Airbus safely. So we're going to take a look at them here on stand, and then we'll jump into the air and have a look at them there as well. I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but none of this is for any real-world use, of course. It's just to give you some extra context on your home simulations. For those of you who haven't seen the Fenix Simulations A320 already, it is a recently released, very high detail A320 for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and something we've been looking at on the channel recently. It's a very exciting aircraft. Before we do, I'd just like to remind you about our partnership with Apex Gaming PCs, where you can get one of the 320 SimPilot line of gaming PCs. You can customize them on the website, use the code 320 SimPilot for a discount, and you'll be supporting the channel if you do buy one. Right, so here we are on the flight deck, and before we get started, let's go to our EFB. You need to go to the Fenix app, and then you can go to custom airframe in the sim settings section, airframe, and this is the section we're going to be looking at today. So I've already got another video out where I go through all of these 9 options here in airline modifiable information, so do please check out that video on the channel. But today we're looking at the airframe section, and we've got DDRMI, standby, and metric standby out. Now this metric standby out is not so exciting, pretty self-descriptive, but what we are going to look at in particular is these two. So to start off with, let's look at the standby instrument in the middle, and it says analog. You have 2 options here, ISIS and analog. Analog is this Artificial Horizon, which is a very conventional gyroscopic style instrument, which you'll see on your Cessnas and all sorts. So it does remind you that the Airbus is indeed just another aeroplane, despite all its fancy computers and flight control laws. So that would be the analog option. You can change it over to the ISIS, which stands, as I said, for Integrated Standby Instrument System, which is a bit more of a modern take on the instrument. So I'm going to start off, let's go back to analog. And what we're going to show you is the airplane's cold and dark. In this video, I'm going to do a lot of things with the airplane just to show you things. We're not going to be following procedures for this video. I have videos that take you through all the procedures for the Airbus, from cold and dark all the way through to landing again at the other end. So do please watch those if you're interested in that. So please do ignore everything I do procedurally wise. We're just going to be pressing buttons here to show you. So standby instrument set to analog. That is here. Why is this so important? Well, this is the ultimate backup. What if we lost so many electrical systems or different AC bus bars that our TV screens weren't working? What if this one cracked and then or this one cracked over here and then we were on emergency electrical power? All of these sorts of worst case scenarios, ridiculous amounts of failures, no doubt, but you have to plan for these things. We can't just have 1 or 2 levels of failure redundancy. We need to be able to fly the airplane with many layers of failure. So this is the last backup, and that's why we have it available in all of these versions. As you can see here, it's sitting toppled, as it were. It's a gyroscope, so it needs to have power to spin around, and when it's spinning, you can then level it, and it will work as an artificial horizon, just like we're used to. So crucially, what I want to show you is, and I'm going to turn up the audio. This is actually wired to the hot battery bus. So this, as soon as the batteries are turned on, this instrument is powered. So in the real aircraft, and let me be clear, this is from the older generation airplanes. If you're simulating an older Airbus, then you'd have this. The newer ones from actually quite a while now have had that ISIS instead. But the older generations were built using this one. So as soon as you power on the batteries or turn on the batteries on the overhead panel, this instrument receives power. The reason it's done like that is so that no matter how many failures we've had, how many electrical systems or electrical bus bars are tripped offline, The bus bars are what feed, they're like extension sockets. They feed all the different systems. That's my very simplified way of saying it. As soon as those, if they were all offline, the hot battery bus is still wired up to the batteries. So you don't need any generators, you don't need anything. The batteries will spin this gyroscope around continuously, so you'll have a reference. Crucially important, of course, if we were in cloud, we absolutely need this instrument to be working. It's so important that there is a light in it, and if that light is broken, you are not allowed into cloud. This aeroplane, it's that critical. It's a very, very restrictive instrument that must be working at its best. So I'm going to turn up the audio for you, and I want you to listen for that instrument to spool up. It's one of the noisier things on the flight deck until the avionics fans come online. You'll notice when the batteries come on, we don't get many other systems, but this one does turn on. Avionics cooling and all that's lost because none of the avionics are online really at that point, but this one is. So let's power up and have a listen. So that whirring you can hear is the gyroscope in here. And I can prove that by putting it now, and you'll see that we can now cage it even though we're just running on battery because it's already up and running. I'm not sure how long that would take in real life. I must say I've never tried to cage it before turning on the airplane fully because of course we are draining the batteries while we sit here like this. So yeah, I'm not sure if it would cage immediately or how long it would take for the gyroscope to get up to speed. But here we are, and you can see it's got a little flag in the way until it is fully ready. And now the flag has popped out the way, so probably better to cage it after that's happened. But either way, like I say, in normal operations, you would, once the batteries are on, end up using the external power or starting the APU anyway. So there you go, no matter how serious the electrical failure is, this instrument is powered. You might be wondering, well, what good is this if you can't work out which way you're pointing? Well, of course, for that, up here, famously in the Airbus, we have the standby compass. That's tucked away most of the time, but there it is. It's a whiskey-style compass, very hard to read, but better than nothing and workable. It also works in the complete opposite direction to what you'd expect these style compasses do. For a little side note, someone's pointed out to me that this will actually spin. When you start the APU, a huge electrical current is drawn through the airplane, which will cause this to spin. So let's see if we can simulate that here just to show you. So that takes a second to take effect. And then the starter will take a load of electricity through the airplane. And hopefully from the GPU this time, but it does actually take it, I believe, from the batteries for the APU start anyway. And there they go. Spins around. How great is that? What a great little detail. So that can be folded away. So that is our ultimate backup in an airplane like this. You've got your artificial horizon and you've got your standby compass. And that is the difference with the standby analog. But once we're in the air, this is just going to behave. We don't cage it again in the air. It should work just fine from now on. Now it's aligned just like a normal instrument in a Cessna or so on. We can swap it to ISIS, which is Integrated Standby Instrument System. This is a little bit more complicated. As we can see here, it's got, well, I say more complicated, it's still got a PFD. And of note is you don't have to align or cage this, where it gets powered on with the batteries just the same, and then it will just turn onto the screen all on its own. You don't have to do anything with it. On this, there's not a whole lot to say really on the ground. There's nothing we need to do to it. You'll see this, well, we have a few things. These buttons brighten and dim it down. So that's what they're used for, the most used switches on this. You have a reset button here. So if I reset it by holding this down, it does another little realign. Interestingly, that has to be done every 350 hours that this is powered on. And you might think, well, how does that work? Well, some airlines don't bother to turn off the aircraft overnight. They'll actually leave them with the batteries off, but the ground power still on. Airplanes, like a lot of things, don't like being turned off and on all the time. They'd prefer to be left alone. So some airlines will do it like that. As a result, this could be left on too long and it needs to be reset every now and then. Now, how you're supposed to tell, I don't know. I suppose you probably expect every 350 hours for it to have been turned off at some point in that time. It's quite likely, even for airlines that leave them powered on mostly. So that is what the ISIS is. It behaved in the same way. What I want to point out, though, is that, of course, compared to the standby instrument we had before, analog instrument there, here we have our airspeed and altimeter over here. These have got bugs that you can set, but these not connected really to anything. They're just physical bugs for us to put things like maybe V1 or VAP. So you'll see pilots setting these for takeoff and so on, or maybe for in flight for their V2 in case you lost all the other screens for any reason. But what I want to point out is that this comes from the standby pitot and the standby static, which is on the outside of the aeroplane. So as we were doing a walk around, of course, we'd have seen that here at the front is our FO and captain static ports, as you'd expect. And if we move forward here, we have the standby. Very hard to read against my pink livery from Paddy, but there we go, standby. So we got doubled up, of course. The Airbus is incredibly capable and able to handle a surprising amount of failures. It's a really fantastically designed machine in that sense. So instead of having 3 static ports, we've got 6. So here's our other standby. So there's our standby statics, and then we've also got the captain and FO pitot tubes. Pitot tubes are here, and then we have a standby pitot tube as well. So that's where the information is coming from for these instruments. Do not confuse it with ADR3. ADR is the air data computer, and that, if we have a panel down here, we can switch air data to captain. We can put captain from there as source to 3. The air data computer is not involved when you're talking about these instruments. These are direct standby readings, so they're not as well aligned or calibrated perhaps as air data computer information, but they are more raw data, as it were. It's important not to confuse them, because it could lead you down the wrong path in a diagnosis or something like that. So these are very much directly from the static or the standby sources, whereas ADR3 is a separate computer running that could have its own failures and so on. So they're separate things. Great. So let's go back to our ISIS, and I want to show you another feature this has, which is the bugs function. Now, we have talked about this on the channel before. What you can do here is just set the speed bugs. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different options there, and then you've got 2 different altitude targets you can do there. So to get to this page, this is how you see it normally. You press bugs, and then you have the options. You can then, on the flashing one that's highlighted, you can swivel this dial, and you can increase it as you wish. When you want to turn it on, because remember it's off at the moment, you press the button and it turns it on, and now it will be displayed. If you want to move to the next one, you use the plus and minus, and you can see it goes in a bit of a circle around. So plus will take us around this way on the circle to the altitude bug. Minus will take us to the next speed bug. So I could set another speed over here as I see fit, and all the way around. And of course we could set our altitudes as well. But remember, you must press the button to actually turn it on. Once you've done that, you can hit bugs again, and that's exit. And now you'll see that there's our first bug up there somewhere. And I'm just going to say nobody does this, not that I'm aware of. Now, there may be someone, I'm sure someone watching is going to say that they do use it, so I apologize. Of course, somebody out there will. I've never seen it used. It's not recommended, particularly because of the way it can be set up in a failure case to have the bugs fixed from takeoff or something. So there's a way where you could end up with the wrong bugs displayed and you can't change them, and then that's going to be very confusing if you're trying to fly in an incredibly degraded airplane, which is what it would be if you were using this instrument. If you were sitting in a degraded airplane flying along on this, you could get yourself a bit unstuck if you have the wrong bugs showing on there. So that's what that does. We finally have the LS button. Simply brings up the same landing system or landing scales, depending who you believe, but that's going to bring up these ILS scales that we have onto the instrument. So that is useful, very, very useful, and something that you'll notice we do not get if we have the analog instruments. There is no way to display an ILS on this. You'd have to do a VOR or a surveillance radar, something like that, if you were down to just this set of instruments here. Last up, we have the DDRMI. Now, this is one of my favorite acronyms that I didn't actually fully know until looking around for this video. It stands for Digital Distance and Radio Magnetic Indicator, DDRMI. So that's a new favorite acronym of mine. So this is showing us this instrument down here. Now, this is rare these days. It was fitted to a lot of the older aircraft. It would only typically be fitted with this setup, of course. And what's so different about it? Oh, and there's our I see, there's our metric standby altimeter. I've never seen that before. So that actually pops up down here. When you turn that on, there it is. Never seen it. That's it. Get a meter reading as well for places where, or if you fly in a part of the world that uses meters. Let's get rid of that out of the way. Yeah, so this is quite straightforward, really. It's showing us the DMEs, so DME 1 and 2, and it's showing us a compass card, and we've got needles as well, so it will display VOR 1 or VOR 2 accordingly. So there, very handy. To tune it, you can simply tune it through here. So at the moment they're both pointing to Bovingdon. If I was to go to VOR on here, show the VOR needle, you'll see that Bovingdon is tuned at 11.1 miles and it's back over our right hand shoulder, which is exactly the same information as this is showing us. If I were to tune in a different one, maybe the one that doesn't get reception, let's see, let's put in Biggin, 36 miles away. There we go, it can't find it, so the VOR1 needle has just gone across, and the DME has also blanked out. So that's what you'd expect. This card here, by the way, typically comes from a DRU number 1. In case you were wondering, which I'm sure you weren't, but there you go. So yeah, so it's a handy little tool, but it's totally not required, because if you're in such a degraded situation that these screens are all broken and you're having to manually tune, you might even be using backup tuning down here to try and tune VORs, then this instrument, you're probably going to be getting headings from air traffic control or something like that, and resort to your compass anyway. And as we see, most aircraft that have the ISIS, they would not have the DDRMI anyway. It's not particularly common, so you'd have this sort of setup anyway. So it's often unserviceable. It's not required as part of the MEL. It's just a nice backup, but effectively all it's doing is replicating these screens for their VOR navigating function. So here we are in flight, and I just want to show you some of the practical implications of using the DDRMI. I think we've pretty much covered the standby instruments as best we can, and as you can see, quite useful in flight. And then we have our LS if we need it. The DDRMI down here, currently pointing, got VOR1 is set to Biggin still, 1151, and it counts down 35. As you can see, when you get within 10, it will actually drop down into decimal places. Below 1 mile, it would just read 0. So if we were to then 0.4 is to Barkway, which is over there. So you can see the needle for VOR2, which is shown with the double line, is pointing over to Barkway. If I was to set VOR2 here, then it will match up. There it is, the VOR2 needle showing there. So there we go, it just continuously tunes. It will go with what the Airbus is auto-tuning unless we tune something else in VOR1 or 2. And we could also, of course, tune using the backup nav as well. But it's not something we use, it's not something that's particularly required. Unlike this instrument here, this third horizon. And what I also want to point out while we're here is that this artificial horizon here, this standby instrument, does not use, like I say, the air data or the ADIRU. It is not using the IR3. So up here we have our 3 IR systems. These are using ring laser gyroscopes, much more advanced, and we've got 1, 2 and 3. So 1 for the captain, 1 for the first officer, and then we have a third system. But this is not showing us the third system. This is its own instrument, completely independent, as I said, powered by battery. If we wanted to see the third system, what we would do is move our switching panel, attitude heading, and I can put captain onto 3. So now the captain is seeing the third ring laser gyro, the third ADIRU number 3 running here. This is its own one. So we effectively have 4 artificial horizons available to us on the Airbus. So let's see if we can demonstrate that now, and you'll have to forgive me. I hope I can get this right. So I'm going to do a manual failure, and then let's go to navigation, and we'll fail. Let's fail the IR1. There we go. So now we've lost our autopilot because we're using autopilot 1. I'm just going to put in autopilot 2, usually this side. And let's just keep it level at 6,000 feet. There we go. So as you can see, we've lost our artificial horizon. That's no good. So what I'm going to do is switch it over to attitude heading, captain's number 3. And now we get it back because it's using that third IR system. So there we go. Isn't that great? And if you look now, we're back to having 3 because this is using IR3, this one over here is using IR2, and this one's using its own information. It's the same system with the air data computer. If I were to fail let's fail the air data number 3 now, ADR3, here, we actually lose because we were displaying well, actually, no, we've gone into a bit of a downgraded situation, no surprise. Let's display ADR3, there we go. So that's the third air data computer being displayed over here now. So this is all running through our third system, effectively, and that's now disappeared. But once again, even though the third system uses the standby pitos and static ports, because we haven't actually blocked those ports on the outside of the airplane, the raw data is still available here. It's just the third computer that has failed. So this is a pretty serious situation. We've lost quite a lot of stuff here, and yet the standby instruments are still working. And we can sort of keep going on like that. We could fail all of the IRs, which I can do now. IR3, that's a position failure, sorry. Let's fail IR3. Let's fail IR, let's go back. IR1, and let's fail IR2. There we go. We can't get anything on the PFDs now. It doesn't matter which one of the switching we switch it to, because what we've done is failed all 3 of our fancy IR systems. But never fear. You're getting lots of warnings here for no surprise. We've actually gone into alternate law, or even direct law, actually. Use man bitstream. Yeah, there we go. So this is incredibly serious failure, not something you'd expect to see. I don't know if there's any recorded cases of this, but even so, now we are effectively flying a big Cessna, and we have our trusty standby instrument here. And if we were to go back to our sim settings, we can change it to the let me just cancel that warning for you. Just warnings we're leaving the altitude. Again, I'm not flying the airplane. This is not how you deal with failures at all. I'm just showing you this stuff. Here's the analog instruments, and lo and behold, that's running there. And as we turn the airplane, it's available to us. And here we go, we're in cloud, so of course, vitally important that we have access to that information. And then we got our standby airspeed and altimeter. The ISIS is definitely the preferred instrument here because it's just so much more traditional, easier to see the speed and so on than those very small dials that we have otherwise. Great. So that is showing us if we've lost an awful lot of navigation systems. I mentioned earlier as well that it's plugged straight into the hot battery bus effectively, so it's always powered. So here you go, the hot bus bars are their own issue. Let me show you the electrical page on this aircraft. So these bus bars are there to provide power to lots of different systems. They can fail, so if one bus fails, systems are all split up to make sure that it doesn't bring a lot of problems. Let me just wind the altitude the other way so it stops buzzing at us. So for example, the TV screens on the right hand side of the airplane might be from AC bus bar 2, whilst these TV screens are from AC bus bar 1, etc, etc. Actually, these ones over here are from the AC essential bus bar. They're in here, which I talk about in my in one of my other videos. So what I'm going to do is show you how we can fail how many bus bars. So let's fail AC bus 1. That's also therefore removed our ability to have let's swap over to the essential. So now we have AC essential fed by the AC bus 2, but disaster, AC bus 2 has decided it's going to fail as well, so we'll fail that. And we're into a pretty dramatic situation here. This would actually bring you all the way down to electrical emergency config, as you can see. Now this is the worst case Airbus situation. It actually deploys the ram air turbine, which is now sitting on the outside of the airplane, spinning around in the airflow. Pretty hard to see here actually, because of the murk. There it is. So that is giving us some power, but that's actually sending power to the essential DC and AC essential buses, which gives us these screens still. But it could be worse, hence we've lost the MTD over there. So let's make it worse. Let's keep at it. Oh no, don't do that, cancel. What we're going to do is go to MTD menu config, manual failures, and now let's save all the AC essential fails as well, which is, you know, ridiculously bad luck, but let's do it. AC essential. So there you can see that's killed off our screens. So even if everything else was working, so let's imagine that all of our air data computers, all of our IRs had all been running just fine, and you'll notice that these can actually run on battery as well. Some of these systems, only system 1 actually will run on battery when you turn everything off. But even if all of that had failed and all of that was working, but then we lost all of the electrical bus bars that power them, we could be in this situation. But lo and behold, it's still running. You can't even tell. This looks exactly like it does if everything was working just fine, as we saw at the start of the flight. And that is the design. You know, it's supposed to be like this. It's incredibly redundant. It's incredibly well set up to handle lots and lots of redundancy situations. Very, very powerful tool. And as I said at the start of the video, something that's crucially important to dealing with the Airbus, and it's an important part of this airplane, and it sits at the heart of what allows us to operate safely by having something like this sitting there. As you can see, we're flying around in cloud without any of the screens on the ram air turbine. We've lost whole air data computers and electrical systems. It doesn't actually matter now because all our electrics are off, and yet here I am, 230 knots, 7,000 feet over London. Totally safe place to be. And from here you would move on to using your standby compass, getting headings from air traffic control, trying to talk you down. They'd do a surveillance radar approach, something like that, to get you over to an airport for a safe landing. We could, of course, bring up LS And we could even tune in an ILS through backup nav, LS, and then you could put in the frequency here and bring it up there. And you can actually fly an ILS like this using just that instrument. It's a brilliant piece of design. I'm always impressed with the Airbus and how capable it is. Now this is a very different sort of airplane to what we normally have. You've got it to manually trim, as you can see. That's me doing the trimming and so on. But that is a topic for another video. It's a huge difference. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. It's certainly an interesting topic for me to talk about, and thank you for the questions and people asking about this sort of stuff. So do keep it coming. If there's different things you'd like to see about the Airbus, do let me know. Come along to a live stream where I can answer your questions live, and we can fly different flights in the Airbus and other airliners. There'll be plenty more guides, videos, tutorials coming on the channel, as well as live streams, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.